It is the Resistance Report for May 1st, 2017. Good evening. May 1st traditionally has been known as International Workers' Day. That started actually in remembrance of the Haymarket Affair in 1886, when workers were demonstrating against police brutality. Several workers had been victims of police violence the previous day, and then somebody lobbed a bomb into the crowd, and both police and civilians were killed. And starting in 1886, we celebrated International Workers' Day. But it has an interesting history because beginning in 1921, we substituted a different name for it officially. That is because there was a Red Scare. A few years before, there had been a communist revolution in Russia, and that spooked a lot of people in the United States. So instead of International Workers' Day, it was called Loyalty Day. And in 1955, Loyalty Day was moved to May 1st, so that there'd be absolutely no question that it was not International Workers' Day, it was not about communism or socialism or American workers, it was supposed to be about loyalty. Loyalty to the United States. 1955, that was when Joe McCarthy was conducting his communist witch hunts with his right-hand man, Roy Cohn, who just happens to be one of Donald Trump's early mentors. And today, Donald Trump continued with that tradition and declared today not International Workers' Day, but Loyalty Day. Now, with Loyalty Day, again, ever since 1955, in fact, you can trace it right back to 1921, there has been a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, fears that somehow immigrants will be infecting the rest of American society. Those early fears were about communism, and then even more about the Red Scare of Joe McCarthyism. And now it's not exactly communism any longer. It has to do with terrorism. But the xenophobia, the fear of foreigners, the fear of immigrants, is remarkably similar. I think what I'll do tonight is start with the latest Trump outrages, and then I want to give you some optimistic ideas. I don't want these resistance reports to be only about outrage. I want them also to be opportunities for us to reflect on how much has been accomplished to actually resist Donald Trump and what he represents. Now, in the outrage portion of this broadcast, I want to just refer to a broadcast earlier today on CBS This Morning, when Donald Trump grew very agitated when John Dickerson, CBS's John Dickerson conducting the interview, asked Donald Trump about his post, his March 4th post, in which he claimed to be wiretapped by Barack Obama and also called Obama a sick man. We tend to forget that that was part of that tweet storm on March 4th. Well, the minute he did that, Trump cut Dickerson off mid-sentence and said, "You don't have to ask me." And Dickerson said, "Why not?" And Trump said, "Because I have my own opinions. You can have your opinions. Okay, it's enough." And then Trump stopped the interview, just ended the interview at that point. Now, it's interesting to me that what Donald Trump is now doing about some of his more outrageous comments is he's calling them his opinions and saying, well, anybody can have their opinions. My facts are my facts, your facts are your facts. Well, let me just say to Donald Trump, if he happens to be watching, or to the rest of us who actually are concerned about Donald Trump, it's not a matter of your opinions. The President of the United States' opinions have huge influence if they are based on nothing, if they're based just on his paranoia, that paranoia infects the rest of the country. Many millions of people believe what a president says. So it's not enough for Donald Trump to say now, well, it's my opinion, and I can have my opinion, you can have your opinion. No, he's president of the United States. And if he has no basis for his opinion, he has no reason to express that opinion. He can't have it both ways. He can't be president of the United States and also feel free to say anything he wants that has no basis in fact whatsoever. And if you can't even sit down for an interview and talk to the American people about the fact that he doesn't have any basis in fact for what he said, then he shouldn't be president. If you can't take the heat, as the old saying goes, get out of the kitchen. One other outrage of the day, and then I promise we'll move on to more optimistic notes. After only 6 days on the job, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue moved today to stall one of First Lady Michelle Obama's signature initiatives and accomplishments, that was stricter nutritional standards for school breakfasts and lunches, which feed more than 31 million children. And what did Perdue say? And what was his logic for slowing down this initiative and then reversing it? Well, he said, quote, "We know meals cannot be nutritious if they're not consumed, if they're thrown out." That's what he told reporters after sitting there with a group of fifth graders munching on chicken nuggets. In other words, Sonny Perdue's logic is, if fifth graders like junk food, then they should get junk food. Otherwise, it gets thrown out. Well, I'm sorry, Sonny Perdue. It might be that wholesome food is not only good for you, but a lot of people like wholesome food. Donald Trump and his cabinet continue to do what they can and will continue in the future to do whatever they can to not only erase and repeal and eliminate any Obama initiatives, but also set America on the road backwards. But here's where my optimism comes in, and here's what you should know. First of all, in the spending agreement that was reached last night to keep the government funded through the end of September, Donald Trump got rolled. His wall did not get funded. In fact, the measure that did pass puts very strict limits on what any money can be used for with regard to border security. It makes it almost impossible for Trump to pay for even starting his wall. Number two, no funding can be cut for sanctuary cities, despite what Donald Trump wants. No funding cuts for sanctuary cities. Three, no money for a deportation force in ICE. Non-defense domestic spending will go up despite Trump's insistence it should not. The National Institutes of Health. Remember, Trump was going to cut the National Institutes of Health by a third? Well, actually, it gets a $2 billion boost on top of a huge increase it got last year. Also, Trump wanted to cut other scientific inquiry. Remember, that was part of his budget. Just going through all the science budgets in the government and cutting them. Well, almost no cuts in any science budget. Trump wanted to cut the EPA back dramatically, also by a third, but the EPA's budget was trimmed by just 1% and no staff cuts at all. No cuts in Planned Parenthood. Trump gets less than half as much for the military as he said was absolutely necessary. The measure that was passed last night also does not fund the Justice Department for stopping medical marijuana. in states where it's been legalized, even though Trump and Jeff Sessions sought such funding. And Obamacare subsidies, the subsidies built into the Affordable Care Act, will continue. In other words, not only did Trump get rolled, but the United States and the American people came out on top. Here's the question for you. Why? Republicans are in control of the House. Republicans are in control of the Senate. Why didn't Trump get what he wanted? Well, here's part of the silver lining, part of the good news. On average, Trump's approval ratings continue to plummet. And it's not just, now, still very good among Republicans, that's true, but among independents, keep your eye on independents. Now, his approval ratings are down in almost single digits among Democrats. That's not surprising. But there are more independents than there are Republicans, and there are more independents than there are Democrats. Independents, people who do not have a registered party, are extremely important. Trump's rating among independents is down now to 39%. 8 years ago, Obama had a 64% approval rating among independents. 64% versus Trump's 39%. Remember, independents are bigger than either registered Republicans or registered Democrats. George W. Bush had an approval rating at this time in his presidency of 61%. Now, what does this mean as a practical matter? All of these Republicans in the House and many in the Senate, they are going to be up for re-election in 2018. They know that many people who might vote for them or, on the other hand, might vote for their challenger are independents. With Donald Trump in the basement among independent voters, they don't worry about saying no to Donald Trump. In fact, there are nearly 24 Republican members of Congress sitting in districts that Donald Trump lost last fall. They are especially vulnerable, and they are not just not going to vote with Trump, but they're actually going to look for opportunities to vote against him, to establish their credibility. That means that on the big tax cut that Trump wants to give to corporations, the chances are almost nil that he's going to get it, because the deficit hawks among the Republicans aren't going to go along with him, because that's going to create a $5 to $7 trillion deficit over 10 years. And these Republicans that are in districts that went for Hillary are not going to vote with him or for him. And the same thing goes for their continuous efforts to repeal and so-called replace the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. So that gives me some optimism. Another cause for optimism has to do with the fact that many of you are so activist. Your activism is the silver lining on this dark cloud. We have not seen this degree of political activism since the Vietnam War, the anti-Vietnam War activism, which ultimately ended the Vietnam War. And don't think for a moment that members of Congress are not acutely aware of how activist you are. You are jamming their phone lines. You are telling them in no uncertain terms, Republicans and Democrats, exactly how you feel and what you feel. You have stood up. You've gone to town halls. You have worked with the local newspapers and the local press in their districts. This is not going unnoticed. They hear you. And you have had a huge impact so far. Donald Trump would have got a lot of what he wants so far in his presidency, his first 100 days, if it weren't for you. And finally, my fourth cause of optimism, and this is a slightly longer-term issue, but it is also very relevant. Trump voters are getting older, while the rest of America, particularly young America, is getting more progressive. For example, the median age of Fox News viewers. What do you think the median age is of Fox News viewers? I want you to just think for yourself. What do you think the median age of Fox News? That means half above them, half below them. What do you think it is? 50? 55? 60? No, you're still too low. 65? Nope, still too low. The median age of Fox News viewers now is 69 years old. Young people are not watching Fox News. In fact, a lot of young people are not watching cable news at all, to tell you the truth. The vast majority of young people in America who actually participated in the 2016 election, when did they participate? For whom did they participate? They got involved in the Democratic primaries, and they were supportive and activist in their support. And this is the word, activist, in their support for Bernie Sanders. Those young people across America are blacker and browner and more urban and more tolerant on social issues and less xenophobic and less racist and more open and more idealistic than any generation of young people I have come across in my 45 years of teaching. If that doesn't give you cause for optimism, I don't know what does. Now, don't for a moment believe that we are out of danger. I say all of that because I don't want you to breathe a sigh of relief and then go home and not continue the work you're doing. In fact, just the opposite. Because this Trump budget that keeps, rather the government budget that keeps the government running through, it's only through September. Besides, Trump can and will continue to do much through executive orders. His cabinet members have a lot of authority over everything from justice to housing to schools to natural resources to the environment, and you know they are moving as fast as they can back in time. We also need to be prepared, and I hate to even say it, but I want to say it because I want to fortify you and all of us. We've got to be prepared for the possibility of a terrorist attack in the United States and what Donald Trump will do with that. So this is no time to relax. Relax your vigilance. Your activism and your vigilance continue to be both necessary and critical. And yet I thought it appropriate on May Day, May 1st, International Workers' Day, to at least share with you some silver linings on this dark Trump cloud. And now your questions. Debbie Dunn, I keep trying to figure out what Trump's endgame is. After he has filled the government with his cronies, taken away any kind of good health care coverage for all, undone environmental protections, destroyed our public school system, what then? What kind of America does he want? Debbie, I don't think Donald Trump has a clear ideology. His ideology is egoism. He wants to win, and he wants to get even. Right now, he feels that he can win by out-Republicaning, out-moving to the right, even Republicans in Congress. That's how he thinks he can win. He can keep his supporters in tow, keep them enthusiastic. That's what he did Saturday night when he goes to Pennsylvania and he has a big rally and they all shout and they say, lock her up. And we're back in the campaign. That's what he wants. That's what Donald Trump wants. He's a narcissist. He doesn't have an ideology, except narcissism. You know, some people have ideologies. They may be conservatives, they may be liberals, they may be Republicans, they may be Democrats. Trump is a narcissist. Jake Owsley, I understand the need to unite and organize, but how can one have empathy for and rationalize and have any relationship with a Trump supporter? This feels beyond left-right policy nuance. I feel it's insanity to support this guy and his staff. Jake, in terms of organizing and mobilizing, the low-hanging fruit right now for you and for me and for everybody who understands how unhinged and dangerous Donald Trump is, the low-hanging fruit, that's not Trump supporters. The low-hanging fruit are independents. Or they are some people who just sat out the last election. You know, the party of non-voters is larger than any Republican Party or any Democratic Party. So the low-hanging fruit in terms of who you need to reach are the independents and the non-voters. Robert Lyons, is it time to do away with political parties and go to a one-voter, one-vote election process? I feel that would force candidates to run on the issues, get more involved with voters, and not be swayed by party politics. Many people feel they're left without representation in a two-party system. Robert, many people have suggested, and it is up to the states, and some states do have a kind of instant voting of the top one or two that come out from the pool of voting. That is, some cities have instant runoff elections. Now, the jury is out on instant runoff elections. Some people feel that they do get out of the party system and give people more option and more choice, but other people worry that everybody's second choice may not be nearly as good as one of the first choices. So it's something to keep in mind. I am keeping an open mind about instant runoffs, but let's see. Carrie Pike, do alterations to Electoral College require a constitutional convention? Carrie, no, they don't. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but what you need to do is get your state legislature, if it hasn't already, to support an interstate compact of states that will say and pledge that all of their electoral votes will go to the winner of the popular vote. That will essentially make the Electoral College vote irrelevant. Vanessa Riley, how can we pressure the news media to stop covering this regime as if they're reporting the latest antics of a reality TV show? How do we demand that journalistic integrity replace ratings boosting reporting? Well, Vanessa, there's no way, we can demand it, but the fact of the matter is that we live in a world where, fortunately or unfortunately, mostly unfortunately, I have to share your view, ratings spell profits. And so most of our television shows, our cable news shows, most of what we see, and also most of what we read depends upon what the editors and producers think are going to get the eyeballs and get people charged up. And that can often mean that you get a kind of, as you put it, the antics of a reality TV show, especially when you have a reality TV show star as your president. I think that all of us have a responsibility as consumers of the news to cater to not that kind of spectacular ratings contest, but actually to watch and buy information to the extent that we purchase it that is not based on commercial considerations. Maura Newman, on this May Day, I'd like to remind people to look at their respective state legislatures for bills that attempt to harm immigrant communities. Please remind everyone to follow what goes on at their state level when it comes to sanctuary city legislation. Maria, you're absolutely right. And I started this little broadcast talking about the origins of May Day and what the Red Scares of the 1920s and also the 1950s did to it, and how anti-immigration fears were connected to both of those Red Scares. And you can feel them right now, accelerated by Donald Trump. Two more. David Newcomer, what can we do to stop the White House from pulling a fast one on health care? David, by fast one, I assume that you mean that Donald Trump and the White House will try to get something through the House in the dead of night when people are not paying attention. I think that's very, very hard right now. It might have been possible weeks ago, but right now people are paying attention. The news media is ready for the House to begin voting, or they're watching very carefully on whether Paul Ryan has the nose count. Paul Ryan is looking at the Republicans and seeing if he can get a majority in the House. He's counting noses. And the minute he gets that nose count, he's going to put that bill in. But you still have to go to the Senate. And that's going to be very difficult to get through the Senate. Anything that repeals and tries to replace Obamacare. You know, my worry is that basically what's going to happen is Trump is going to try to fudge it as he does everything else. He's going to try to say that he's doing one thing and actually do another. And that's why we have to depend on reporting. We have to depend on good reporting as to what's actually in that bill. Mary Ellen Hardy, is there somewhere citizens can write or call to have input on the Democratic Party agenda? How does the party platform get decided? Who is in on it? I plan to keep resisting, but what are we for? What is our jobs plan? What is our fix for Obamacare? Mary Ellen, you raise an incredibly important point. That is, we can't be just against Trump. By the way, I do want to bring to your attention something I posted today on Facebook, and that is a wonderful article by Evan Osnos in the New Yorker, the latest New Yorker, about why the odds of a Trump impeachment are getting higher and higher. But we can't just be anti-Trump. We have got to be pro-progressive reform and progressive change. And that means we have to have an agenda that really does emphasize economic justice and social justice. And one of the problems lurking in the background here is that we're going to, even if we get rid of Trump, we're going to have just a series of more Trumps, more demagogues, if half of the American population feels that the game is rigged against them, and much of the other half is either doing the rigging or is still feeling victimized by an economy and a democracy that are not working. We have got to be in the vanguard of making our economy and our democracy work for everybody. Now, there are things that can be done. We can get big money out of politics. We can have a single-payer health care system. We can have a tax system that taxes the wealthy and uses the taxes to have a first-class system of early childhood education all the way through free college education. We can have a system of justice that is not a militarized system, and we can get a lot of people out of jail who shouldn't be in jail, who are there for absolutely no reason except that they are black or Hispanic or were at the wrong place in the wrong time. There are many things that we have to do as a country. And your question, why aren't the Democrats advancing this? Why aren't the Democrats being a voice, a loud and righteous and indignant voice for these kinds of reforms? I frankly don't know. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If the Democratic Party does not fill the political void right now with a movement that takes advantage of all of the energy that's welling up from the grassroots, not only anti-Trump, but also pro-progressive agenda, then the Democratic Party is irrelevant to the future. Then we're going to have to at least seriously think about a third party. The danger, of course, is evident. That is, third parties often draw votes away from the party closest to them ideologically. I don't want to see that happen. But if we don't see major change and backbone and guts in the Democratic Party, what option do we have? That ends tonight's Resistance Report. Again, I want to thank Yael Bridge and also Sasha Lightman for their enormous help. And I'll see you tomorrow.